retelling fairy tales. Retelling fairy tales to retelling, myths. And Hades and Persephone is just classic, like, the bad boy and the good girl, and like I just wanted to put my spin on it, and so that's what happened.
I love it. Well, for all of you, I mean, Katee and Rebekah, you've both done retellings of pre-existing stories, fairy tales, Disney villains, myths. And honestly, all romance authors sort of do retellings in terms of playing with tropes and how that functions in their work. So for all of you, how do you take a pre-existing thing, whether it's a trope or the actual like outline of a story structure of a myth or a fairy tale, and make it your own and make it something fresh and new and exciting?
Katee, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Fresh off of that. Go ahead, tell us.
There's a reason those core stories exist. Like Beauty and the Beast, you cannot throw a stone into a pool of romance novels without hitting like 20 Beauty and the Beast retellings. There's a reason those core stories resonate, and it's so fun to take the expectations because the readers know those beats by heart. Like they know exactly what to expect. And it allows you to kind of get creative and play with those expectations in a way that you can't necessarily with like brand new content, because they don't know what to expect going with brand new content. In a retelling, it's like, oh, I know this path. How are you going to make it new to me? And so that's a fun challenge that I really enjoy.
Yeah, for me, my recent retellings are cowboy based. And all three books are on like based on a family too. So I was working with the tropes from, I did Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, and then the next book is Beauty and the Beast, like Katee said. Beauty and the Beast. But I was lucky enough to have the framework of the brothers and the family, so that gave me even like more of a roadmap. I knew I had to stay within the confines of like what was happening at their ranch and all of that stuff. So that made it a little bit easier and also unique because it's fairy tales set someplace that's new to readers.
Mm.
I haven't ever done a retelling. Maybe I've thought about retelling Wuthering Heights, and that sounds so depressing. That's about the closest I've ever come to thinking about doing a retelling. I usually am looking for my tropes, like, okay, there's a single dad, and okay, over here they are kind of best friends. So I'm usually trying to fit my stories into the tropes to make sure that readers have something to grab a hold of. So sometimes I kind of do the reverse, where I just kind of feel, what am I thinking about right now? What's important to me right now? What do I want to talk about right now? And then the characters kind of form before anything else. And so so I've never done a retelling. That's a challenge that I definitely want to take up, but yeah.
Please do a retelling of Wuthering Heights with your take on it. Like I would just.
It sounds like we're going to be crying a lot though, right?
I mean, what's new? I always cry in your books.
I was just about to say, how would that be different from any other Kennedy Ryan book?
Gothic? It would be gothic.
Well, for all of you, do you have a trope or a story that you've retold that was the most difficult for you to crack, that you were like, oh, I want to do this trope, or I want to retell this thing, and then you got into it and you were like, how?
Go
ahead, Katee. Marina and I are talking about this outside of the Zoom arena. But for me, the hardest so far was doing Sleeping Beauty, because the original fairy tale is like really weird. She's asleep for part of it, and then the prince impregnates her while she's sleeping, so that's a little much. And then the whole second half of the original fairy tale, it's actually like the queen mother is like an ogre, and she's trying to eat the princess and her children. And I was like, I was like writing a story about like Black cowboys and their big family, and I was like, I don't want to make their mom like an evil person. I want her to be like a loving person. So I had to like weed that out. And then even the Disney version of Sleeping Beauty it's like kind of a weird movie. Like the framing device is like their dads. Like it's I forgot that one from when I was a kid. Like you go back and watch it, it's the two kings like playing matchmaker between their kids. And I was like, oh, that's a little weird too, especially since I like killed half of the parents in the Cowboy series. So I was like, Well, the Sleeping Beauty for me was definitely the hardest, just trying to figure out how to do the sleeping part. And I ended up doing an amnesia plot, and I think it worked out pretty well.
Rebekah, after you told me that was right when people were getting mad about the Snow White redo ride at Disneyland and the lack of consent in the kiss, and I was like, y'all need to go read Sleeping Beauty and then we'll talk.
Yeah, Sleeping Beauty, that is a very weird fairy tale.
There's not a lot of consent in fairy tales, especially like some of those ones. My most difficult one is I just finished Dark Olympus 3, which is Helen, Achilles, and Patroclus, and it's really hard to rewrite a tragedy as like a happily ever after while still doing justice to like the base like content. And it was just messy. It was messy and fun messy, but also just it was really, really challenging to be like, how do I nod back to the original, like the Trojan War, and still, so it's familiar, but like make it my own. And it was not easy.
What about you, Kennedy?
Well, since I haven't really done a retelling necessarily, I'm thinking about the tropes that I've written to. I think the one that I just did for real, which is kind of like the Hollywood story. I think the biggest thing for me is kind of managing people's expectations, because every time I say a trope, people expect it to be one thing, and then they're like, oh, it's not that, is it? So with this Hollywood story, I think I'm just kind of managing people's expectations about what a Hollywood romance kind of will look like through my lens, which is kind of different than what people might expect. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, another thing that I feel is really a through line in all of your work is that setting is so lush and so crucial, whether it's the invented space of Olympus or the Pleasant Brothers Ranch, or for Kennedy, you have these very real worlds, Hollywood or DC politics or Atlanta. So for all of you, how do you build your setting? Like at what part does that come into your process, and how important is it to you in developing your story?
Go ahead, Katie.
No, Rebekah, you start this time since you're so happy to nominate Katie.
Every time.
Last time. Take turns. We'll take turns. Go ahead.
So funny story, I suck at setting. When I write books, it's like, oh, they're in a room, maybe, I don't know. So my editor goes through and like tags throughout the first pass edits, like world building opportunity here, like we don't understand what's happening, please explain some part of this, because it's all in my head, it's just not on the page. So the world building is really important to me, it's just not, I don't always translate it well, like when I'm on my own, so I need somebody else to help me bring that out, because because I add about 30,000 words, which is math, 30,000 words during my first draft, and probably 70% of that is world building, because that's how like much it doesn't make it in when I'm left on my own. So it's very important, it's just, it's not all me, I need help.
It maybe it's not organic to you as you start, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't train, like I did a lot of world building creating Olympus because I knew I needed 13, because 13 is like a pretty number, and I knew I did some sketch out of like what those roles would look like and like who I want in those roles and like kind of ideas for the future stuff, but it just didn't show up on the page until somebody asked me questions about it.
Yeah. Kennedy, what about you? Especially being so steeped in the real world.
Right. I have no spatial intelligence, like at all.
Me either.
No, it's bad. Like I have to use Google Maps, like to go to the places I go every day. I'm like, do I know how to? My husband's like, it's 5 minutes away. So literally, it's the same as Katie. When I'm writing, my editor will go, they're in a white room. Like right now, they're just in a big blank space. You need to tell me what this setting is. And I literally have to, for rooms, I have so little spatial intelligence. For rooms, I will have to go on Pinterest and like find pictures of rooms and describe the rooms, like to get myself going. During my All the King's Men duet, which goes to all these different places, like they go to Amsterdam, they go to Montana, they go to DC, they go to all these places. And I literally just like would go to the tour, you know, like the tour guides and the Yelp reviews and anything that would give me real, like something to hold on to that would start to paint that picture for me, because I'm so bad at it. So for me, setting is really, really important, but it's also such a natural weakness that I have to kind of go to. I'm literally reading Yelp reviews about people going to, you know, pick tulips in Amsterdam so that I can start to really, you know, visualize it. So, you know.
Yeah. And Rebekah?
We all do a little bit of research about location. Most of the places that I write about are based on real places. And if they're fake, it'll still be based on a real place. Big Rock Ranch is based on a real ranch in Montana that I haven't been to, but their website is amazing. So I kind of drew the mental map and like, just I pulled a lot of like just ideas from that website and that company, but I like came up with a sense of what was happening there and then changed it to fit, if that makes sense. You know, like I looked at their menus just to see what they were serving, but I didn't like copy the menus. I was just like, oh, this gives me ideas of like other things I could put on like a ranch menu. And then the other part of it, I actually went to an apple farm 2 hours away from LA to interview a woman who ran the apple farm for, I want to say 6 books ago. I went to go interview her for Sanctuary, and I have gotten so much out of that like one day. It was amazing because I was like, I could write so many farm books based like on this one specific little town. So yeah, the town in Sanctuary is also based on that town in a real town, Ghent in upstate New York, that has a big apple community too. So I usually pull from real places and then just go from there.
Nice. Well, another thing you all have in common is heat, which is something you ladies know how to do incredibly well. So for each of you, and Rebekah, you do have to start this time. What makes a good sex scene on the page, and how do you approach writing one?
I always start with the characters. So there's some authors that I absolutely love, that their sex scenes are kind of similar, like not exactly the same, but they have like certain beats to their sex scenes that I'm like, okay, I know this is going to happen in this book, which is fine. I think that comfort in romance is like why we come back to romance. But I find my characters are all such different people. So when I think about people being intimate with each other, no combination of people is having sex the exact same way. So I always start with the characters, and then I always try to think about, because my books sometimes have many sex scenes in them. I try to think about what they need in that moment, right? So do they need a lot of warmth and intimacy? Do they need it like a quick and dirty situation? Where are they? Are they like having sex someplace kind of bizarre and they need to, you know, be aware of their surroundings? So yeah, usually it's the character's needs, and then the settings. And then for anyone who's wondering, if I ever get stuck, I go right to a porn website. I will watch porn for like 4 hours, try to figure out, like there's a couple scenes in Zenny where I was trying to figure out like the logistics. And I was like, where would like a leg be if they were trying to do this? And I just watch porn. You'll be fine.
What about you, Kennedy? Same advice?
I mean, and you, yeah, exactly, exact same. I think usually, sometimes when I'm reading a sex scene, I will find myself skimming sometimes, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know this. Yeah, this is okay. So a lot of times when I'm writing my sex scenes, and this might sound weird, I want the reader to feel like if I skim this, I'm going to miss something really important. Because this sex scene is actually going to move the story forward. It's going to move that relationship forward. It's going to deepen their emotional connection probably. And I want them to feel like if I skim this, I'm going to miss something vital that's happening in this relationship. And so usually I approach sex scenes like that, you know, in part. I have been known to watch some porn for sure. It's so funny because when I was writing this last book, the heroine needed to be less energetic in this particular scene. And so I was looking for scenes where the hero does most of the guy is doing most of the work. And so I somehow stumbled upon these sketches from Cosmo. and I was sprinting at 1 a.m. Sarah McLean and I dragged each other across our last deadlines. Literally we're up at 2:00 every morning, sprinting to get our books done. And I sent her the sketch and I was like, does this make any sense to you? She's like, oh my gosh, what is that? I'm so frightened right now. I was like, I'm going to use it. So, you figure it out.
And Katee?
I similarly, I feel like, especially in my books, my characters are often not being particularly honest with each other outside of sex. And so the sex is a way that two very guarded characters can be, it's very revealing in different ways. And I like to just, if I'm not at least slightly scandalized, I'm not doing it right. So I usually am very surprised on where the kinks or the quirks or what have you, the personal preferences, because it's Rebekah said, it's so unique to each book, each couple or throuple. It's so very specific to them, what they're into and what cranks their engine. When I get stuck though, I have Barbies that I like.
I've seen this on Instagram.
Well, just because with the thruples in particular, there's 3 people, that's a lot of limbs. It's how would this work? And I found these Barbies are bendy Barbies, and so I will sketch out a position and be like, would this actually work with a human body? And it's nice because it's porn for my on demand of exactly where was that leg go? I don't know. No, that won't work. Okay, let's stick a pillow under there. How about now? So it's been really helpful.
I love it. Well, another thing you all excel at is including darker themes in your work, whether it be sort of something sinfully dark in the bedroom and including BDSM or other kink, or it be genuinely heavier issues of mental health, domestic violence, things of that nature. And you all do it with such care. So how do you all approach or handle including that darkness while still delivering the escapism of romance that I think pretty much all readers come to the genre for? Katee?
Okay. We're the kids in class who's I'm not going to lift my hand. I don't it's not usually, I don't usually intend to go in writing really dark content. I mean, sometimes I do, but it's not, there's just a level of escapism. This escapism is more that the relationship's a soft place to land, even when it's not soft. You can have all these a history of abuse or scary stuff going on, and it's well, I'm safe with this person, and it's still while stressing the consent and the safety. That is the escapism part sometimes for when I'm writing, is that the relationship itself is that escapism, even with all the chaos and or scary stuff or dark content.
Yeah. Rebekah?
Yeah, I was basically going to say the same thing. I think about all the dark themes I've included, it just depends on where my head is out, what I'm feeling. When I wrote Haven, I was just really pissed off, and I was I need to murder somebody on the page. So that's what happened there. But I think Katee's exactly right. It's I think in real life, traumatic things happen. You lose someone gets sick, even losing a pet or something. Sad, heavy things happen in real life all the time. Obviously, we're in one of the worst years on record, that kind of stuff. But the escapism is that kind of guaranteed soft place to land. And I think Katee does a really good job, and Kennedy too. You guys do a really good job of writing a lot of angst within the relationship too. I'm the punk who's no, let them be in love on page 1. I always, even if it's chaotic
but that's why your books I pitch your books and I'm like, okay, so like their exes are murdered while cheating on them, but like it's a comfort read. Like just trust me, it's a comfort read because even with like the trauma bonding, your relationships are such comfort reads that like it's just eat it with a spoon.
Thank you. I try. Yeah, like Katie said, I think it's just for me, it's like I will do something really horrific in the beginning, but immediately like swaddle that person. Sometimes with friends too, with like friends or family members, and then sometimes love interest. But I try to make sure that that person is always kind of taken care of almost as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. And Kennedy, you?
I think I lean into, writing a lot of like real world, real life stuff, which can sometimes be heavier, not always, but sometimes. And I do write from a very like kind of realism place. But I also try to really lean into joy. I think sometimes when we're tried, that's when we shine brightest. That's when love shines brightest, is sometimes when it's tried. I mean, that's been my relationship, and so I think that's partly why sometimes some of my couples, when they're going through things, they take solace in each other, not usually healing each other, usually that's therapy, but being that soft place to land, being that place where they can be vulnerable, especially when they find themselves in circumstances where they have to be really, really strong, finding someone where you can take off all your armor and you can be completely vulnerable and completely yourself, and just leaning into joy. That's something that I'm really trying to do more and more. So leaning into joy, even if things are difficult. And I think for me, especially because I write a lot of that, these are things that really are happening to people. I make sure that I'm including people who have walked that journey as I'm interviewing, researching, and it really helps for me to see how they came through and how they found joy. And being inspired by those real life stories, because interview is a really, really big part of my creative process. So,
well, something I always love to hear about with authors is research rabbit holes, because I think it's something every writer does, where they just get off on a tangent. They wanted to look up one thing for one sentence, and 3 hours later, they come up for air. So for all of you, what's a research rabbit hole you went down recently, whether it's for something you're working on now or for your most recent release?
Trying to think. I'm coming off a trilogy that I researched for like forever ago, so I'm trying to remember like recent stuff. I think most recently I realized that comedian George Burns, he was born in 1897.
What?
Whoa.
I was like, I was looking up something very random and I came across that and I was like, what? And I messaged like 5 of my friends. I was like, did you know George Burns was born in 1897? That's crazy. That was one thing that I was like, I need to know more. Like he was born before like cars. I thought that was really crazy.
Go ahead, Kennedy.
The one that I think about, and it started as kind of like a rabbit hole a little bit, but it ended up being a major part of the book, a major part of the story, which is for me, people always say, are you a pantser? Are you a plotter? And it's so funny because I was talking with Talia Hibbert. We kind of plot together sometimes. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm either one of those things. Like half the time I don't know what I'm going to write until after I've interviewed like 6 people. And she goes, I said, I feel like I have to find the story. She goes, oh, well, you're a finder. You're a finder. So I'm a finder. So I was researching for my All the King's Men duet, and the heroine, Lennox, is Yavapai Apache. And so I was interviewing all of these Indigenous women, and they literally were giving me assignments. They were like, okay, here's the book that you read. Now you need to read this book. Okay, if you're going to write about this, you got to read this book. And I started going down all these rabbit holes about ceremonies that young girls would go through. And they were like, oh, this is so good. Read this book. And it ended up being like the opening scene was her going through this ceremony that the United States government had outlawed, when they were practicing underground, and then it came back. And then they just started giving me all these assignments, and I didn't know very much about missing and murdered Indigenous women. And then that became a big thing in the book. So for me, it's like a lot of times these rabbit holes are things that that actually are revealing themselves as what I should be writing. And I don't realize it at the time until I'm going through that process. But though that was really cool for me, because the women were literally emailing me books. And when I would go back and I would ask, they would go, "Oh, you read it?" And I'm like, "You told me to read it." So that was really a meaningful one for me.
They're not used to people understanding the assignment, I think.
Well, they gave me so many. They were probably like, "We're going to scare her off."
I should not have gone last. So I'm branching out in genre, and I've been on this. The pandemic times have brought weird stuff. Okay, we're just gonna roll with it. I've been reading a lot of horror, and I've gone down this. I'm on this epic search for like a particular kind of monster romance that meets a specific criteria, and I haven't found it yet. So I decided I was going to write it. But the problem, or not the problem, but the research, I ended up going to like the D&D monster manual and being like, is this monster bangable? Like through the monster manual. And, listen, we're just going to roll with it. We're going to do it. But that was like in texting Jenny Norback and being like, how do we feel about this monster? Is this too far? And you should never text Jenny asking if it's too far, because it's never too far.
The answer is always no.
Yeah. She's like, no, you can go farther, definitely. So that was like probably the weirdest rabbit hole I've ever gone down, because I have a list of monsters. It's like, oh, there are a lot of monsters in the D&D monster manual that are bangable. So in case you were wondering.
I look forward to, Katie.
You should like combine the two and like roll dice, and then whichever monster you end up with from rolling your dice. I've never played D&D, so I'm probably describing this completely inaccurately. But then whichever one you roll, that's what you write. That's it. That's you.
I ended up like narrowing it down to 5, some D&D, some not, but and then I'm gonna do like the Fabio covers, like the oil painting Fabio covers. I commissioned an artist to do the covers like that with monster clenches. So
I love it.
I'm very excited.
Talk after this, because I have one monster coming up and a bigger thing. Now I need to figure out if we're going to end up doing the same monster.
Oh my god!
Ooh, I like it. This is all of a sudden, like 3 years from now, I'll be like, there's a trend.
It's a wave. It is a wave. I mean, I don't know how indicative Twitter is of like overall trends, the greater trends, but there is, the thirst exists. So we're going to feed it.
If we map Buffy to Twilight, we're due for paranormal and monsters right now. So
yep.
We're like way overdue for paranormal monsters. So yep. I think Contempt is like trudging along right now, but I think 2022, 23, we're right back to paranormal and monsters. So
yes, and we're gonna be ready. We're gonna be there for it, and it's gonna be happening.
We're leading the charge. Yeah. Monrom. That's it.
Yes, you heard it here first.
Breaking news: Monroms are so hot right now.
Well, because I love to just hear other people raise each other up, I want to ask each of you, what's something you really admire in the other two's work and wish you could emulate or would like to be stronger at, that you see as a strength in the other's work? Kennedy, you can go first this time. I don't think you've gone first at all.
I think with Katie, I think this kind of covers both of them. I haven't written a throuple. I haven't written like 3 characters. This kind of can cover both. But the way both of them build the trust and the intimacy, the care with which they handle the relationship. I mean, I think I do that to a degree, but I just really admire the way they do that with any dynamic they're working with. With Rebekah, I love how I love both of them really, but with Rebekah especially, how inclusive she is. I mean, obviously, but in her work, the queer representation, pansexual representation, obviously, you know, all across the spectrum of ethnicity. I just think that she's a pioneer, you know, and I would say that. I would say that. I mean, I think that you were doing it, it's like everybody's doing it now, but it's something that you were doing very well and very consistently before everybody was like, let's do this. This is the thing that we should do. And so, you know, I think that's amazing. And Katee, I'm not done with the Neon Gods because I've been under deadline and real promo. But I was reading and I was like, oh my gosh, every time I read Katee, I just get lost in kind of the alpha. And the thing I love about this particular alpha is he's also like OCD, like, you know what I mean? Like he's worried about his floors, you know, I love that you do that. I love the way you present an alpha male, but it's not cringy and it's not, you are still so cognizant of the times that we're living in and of the respect and the consent. That's something that I really, really respect about your work. So.
Okay, Katee or Rebekah, whoever wants to have their love fest next.
I'll go. Kennedy, your work is like makes me want to quit writing, which is the highest of compliments, because it's just like it's the depth that you bring to these subjects and these characters and the care that you handle these like really sensitive topics is just, it blows me away. And I feel like I learned so much, but also like you rip my heart out of my chest at the same time. It's like a multi-level process of reading your books, and it's just like such an immersive emotional experience that it just like I kind of have to brace myself going in, but like in a good way, if that makes sense. Because it's just like, oh, I'm going to really enjoy this. And it's going to be really hot. I'm going to learn a lot, but also I'm going to cry a whole bunch. So I'm ready. And it's phenomenal to me because I like that depth of emotion is something I personally struggle with in my writing. And to see it like done so beautifully, it's just like, it's amazing. And Rebekah, I'm just like in awe of how you can handle such heavy topics and it still feels so soft at the same time. And it's like so soft and so sexy. And like they're just like sexy comfort reads, which like, I don't know anybody else who pulls it off the way you do. And it's such a delicate balance and you just pull it off in every single book. And I'm just in awe. So fangirl.
I have kind of a unique perspective on both of your work as being a former bookseller. And I remember when Kennedy like came on the scene in print and everything, we started carrying her books. And it's interesting when you're an author and a bookseller because you have like your response to the book. And then when you're talking to strangers about the book, when you're like, oh, this is the thing that we're connecting on. And for both of you, but especially you, Kennedy, it's I guess I think what everyone in Romance Landia calls it is the angst, I guess. I'm terrible at that. I am really bad at writing angst. That is something I am just not good at. And so I'm in awe of the way, you know, like Katee mentioned, you're able to like rip readers' hearts out and then like put them back in. I wish I could do that. I'm like, let me swaddle you, but like you're really, really good at like, oh, I'm gonna like drag you over the coals, but you're gonna thank me for it when it's over. And like that's just been, I think that's really unique because I think sometimes when authors do that, it actually doesn't land the recovery in the way that it should sometimes. I think sometimes people go really angsty and by the end you're like, I don't want to do that again. But you have that magic thing where you're like, no, I want to come back for the next one. I want to see what happens in the next book. And that is a gift. That is absolutely a gift. I think writing comedy is very hard and writing like deep angst is very hard. And if you can do either end of the spectrum, it's like very difficult. You are excellent at the angsty side. And Katee, I love the way that you just like go for it. I just stopped myself from swearing a minute. I love the way that you like, every time I jump on Twitter, you're like, okay, I'm writing this crazy thing. And I'm like, yes. I'm like, this is like the stuff that is in like the deep holes of KU that I'm like, I wish more people were writing this stuff and try. Like, I really love that you're just like, nope, I have this wild idea and I'm going to write it. And that's just, it's so refreshing. It's just, it's lovely. And like when I got my copy of Beyond Gods, I was like, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be sexy. Like I don't know. You got it. You have the gift. And I think sometimes in publishing, people do hold themselves back. And I love that you don't. I love that you just go for it.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to make sure we have time for audience questions. So if you have a question, start popping it in the chat so we can get it. And then while we let some questions percolate there, I'm going to wrap up what I have for you with some rapid fire questions. So first of all, in honor of neon gods, what Greek god or goddess or figure of mythology would you most like to
That's tough.
Okay, Hermes. But listen, it's an unconventional choice. But Hermes is like that trickster and like that sort of like, it would be, you don't know what you would get, and like that excites me. So Hermes.
This is tough.
Yeah.
I'm like on this side.
We're dealing with so many absolutely messy figures that I'm like, would I want to get involved with any of these people?
None of the heroes. None of the heroes.
Okay, I'm gonna say something a little bit crazy because I feel like if you're gonna go for it, you got to go like ultra messy, and I'm gonna say Zeus.
Rebekah! Go on.
If you're gonna go for it, like go for the king of sloppy, go for the king of just, and he can like shapeshift and all that other stuff. Just go for it. Go full Zeus if you're gonna do it.
I was gonna say Zeus because I really am going blank. I also thought about Apollo. I mean, there's a couple of different ones, but I was gonna say Zeus because I'm like, he's the biggest dog out there. He could probably really put it down. he's gonna show me some things, and I might almost die, but it might be worth it.
So by nature, gods are immortal. If that was offered to you, if that was on the table, would you want it?
Absolutely.
It sounds horrific, honestly.
God, immortality and like time travel backwards. No, absolutely.
No. So because your books make all of us thirsty, what is the best beverage, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, to pair with your latest release?
Oh, I'm like, we'll say a huckleberry lemon drop.
Ooh, I like that.
I would say just a nice glass of fancy champagne. Sam and Amanda are in Hollywood, and there's a lot of things to celebrate in that book. So a nice glass of celebratory champagne, I think.
I like that.
The hero's drink is Macallan, so I would say probably that with a cigar because that's his thing.
Of course. What do you personally find sexier than anything else in the world?
Confidence. I think confidence. And I think that it's not alpha or beta or anything like that. I wrote a book called Queen Move last year, and people were like, is this a beta hero? Is this because he was not super like growly or anything like that. And she was like a supernova, and he was completely confident in who he was and his, how he was to support her and how he loved her. And just that confidence, it's not about personality. It's just about kind of understanding who you are and what you're in the relationship to do and how you're going to function, and being completely confident no matter what. So confidence.
That's a good one. I would say Kennedy went more like personality wise. I was thinking physically. Because the first two for me are like a really sexy walk and then a really sexy voice. Those are two big ones for me. But also I think someone who's able to stay like really cool and calm under pressure. I'm like really neurotic, so I always find people who are like really cool and can just like keep the temperature down in a room when the time is needed. That to me is like very appealing, because some people go from 0 to 10 really fast, and I think someone who can keep it nice and even, that's nice.
This sounds so cliche, but like the sense of humor, just like somebody who doesn't super take themselves too seriously, that you don't have to like put on a front with, because you can both be goofy and like giggle like fools over like the most ridiculous things. Like that is so sexy to me, just because I personally am like a pick me girl at times, like, oh, just tell me I'm cool, tell me I'm awesome. And it's like, if you somebody that you feel that like secure with, that you're like, oh, we can laugh because you're not going to make fun of me for this silly thing that I really enjoy. So I'm insecure, leave me alone. But yeah, a sense of humor is like, it makes anyone attractive.
Yeah. Okay, so turning to audience questions, is there a subgenre that you all haven't written that you would like to delve into?
I want to write horror. Like I actually have a proposal in with my agent that's gothic, like a lesbian gothic horror novel. So that's what I want to do. That's so off my brand, but I would like to.
Yeah, I would like to do a little bit of everything. I'd like to write a thriller, some horror. I want to write some sci-fi romance. I haven't done that yet, I don't think. Yeah, I would like to do some stuff in space. We haven't been to space yet, and I've been meaning to take lesbians to space for a long time.
There's not enough lesbians in space. That's underrepresented in the cosmos.
I would really like to do some lesbians in space, and just more like paranormal that I haven't written before. I've done vampires, but I want to go back and just hit all the corners of paranormal.
I've been reading. Well, anytime I say reading, that means listening, because I'm an audiophile. But I've been listening to a lot of fantasy lately. I tend not to read whatever I'm writing. So if I'm writing contemporary romance, I'm usually not reading it. And so I think I just finished, I know I'm so late to the party, but I finished the Ember, I think it's the Ember and the Ashes series a little while ago. And now I'm listening to We Something the Flame. I don't know why I can't remember actual title.
We Hunt the Flame.
We Hunt the Flame. Yeah. I've been listening to that, like commute on my walks and things like that. So I mean, I don't know that I can actually do it well, but fantasy is something that appeals to me. I don't know if I could do the world building. I don't know, but my latest book reel is the audiobook is 16 hours long. And I was like, this is kind of like a fantasy novel. This is as long as a fantasy novel. Maybe I could do that. So fantasy kind of appeals, maybe one day fantasy.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask this question. I'm not sure. I do want to try to avoid spoilers since the book just came out yesterday, and I know Romancelandia are incredibly quick readers, but just in case. But so, Katee, is there going to be any interaction between the two Hades in future books?
Probably not within the actual series. I can all but guarantee there will be some in like the Patreon shorts I do, or I'll just write a short at some point. But Hades and Persephone, their story is like done. So each book will be a different couple, which will kind of move away from the lower city for the most part. So I highly doubt we will see that interaction in the actual series itself.
Got it. For all of you, what's your favorite hero you've written? I mean, the partner you still think about even after closing the door on the book. It's like asking you to pick a favorite child. I know.
I have like a top 4. I don't have my top 4. No, 5. My top.
My catalog.
So we have Rafe from Rafe, Mason from Zenny, Daniel from Sated, Jesse from Thorn in the Saddle, which comes out in October. I think he might be a lot of people's favorite from that series. And then Vaughn from Harbor. Vaughn's my baby. I love him.
Oh, Vaughn.
Vaughn's my baby.
This is hard. I guess I don't know that I really don't know that I have favorites. So I'm thinking about the ones that I hear from my readers about the most, probably. August from Long Shot is somebody I hear a lot about, because he's such a great guy, and really walks with the heroine through some difficult times and loves her through those times. And so, and for me, he's a baller. So I'm obsessed with basketball, obsessed with basketball. So all of my ballers, are special to me, because that series for me was just like, I get to geek out on basketball. And my husband was like, okay, we can do this, because we kind of bonded around basketball the way the first couple in Long Shot does. So probably August. The hero I probably hear probably the most from my readers about is Grip. He's a musician, he's an artist. I love to write artists. Like, that's my favorite thing to write, is artists, writers, poets, musicians. That's my favorite thing. And the hero, it sounds promotional, but I promise it's not. But the hero from Real, really, he's a director. And my friends, three of my friends who read it early, they were like, Canon is you. Like, they all separately said that, because he's obsessive, which I am too. And he's a perfectionist, and he has this like artistic obsession. And so Canon, but he's also a mama's boy, so I think those would be my top three.
Yeah. I think it might be just because, so Dmitry Romanov of my O'Malley series, the last book, he's like the villain through the whole series, and then he gets his book in the last book, and he's kind of like he walks so all the other villains could run. So and I'm actually reading through that book right now to refresh my memory, because I'm doing a second generation series, and it's just that couple and that hero have stayed with me, because he's not soft, he's actually kind of a dick, but it's like how he is with her and how he drags her out of the hole. Like, yeah, it's just, yeah, I would never want to meet him in real life, but I love him the most.
Katee, is there a universe connection between wicked villains and neon gods?
Yes, they happen in the same universe. A couple of the characters in the Wicked Villain series are from Olympus. You won't see much crossover on the Olympus side of things for various reasons, but they exist in the same world. And different Hades, though. It's a different Hades. Hades and Learn My Lesson, his happily ever after secured. But yeah, they exist in the same world, and they are connected.
For all of you, when you have to write a super sad or emotional scene, what is your process?
I don't know if I write those scenes. I mean, I do, but like, it's not usually, it happens on accident. Like, because I prefer like the violence to the sadness. And so I did cry in Dark Olympus with the puppies, like the puppy scene where they're having the conversation about, like, I was like, why am I so upset? Like, what is happening? So, but it's on accident. It's not on purpose.
I think for me, because I tend to write, I tend to have a lot of emotional scenes in my books. And a lot of times, like I said, I interview people who have, walked those things before. And a lot of it is just me listening to them, listening to what they've been through. I do interviews by Zoom, so that I don't have to take a lot of notes. I basically just record Zoom interviews. And before I start writing, I just go back and watch all of the interviews that I've done. And I find myself crying as I'm listening to their stories, even when it's, happy. I just, there's something about the connection that I have with the actual people who walked through those situations. And that really fuels it. And then once I'm writing, when I get to those scenes, I amplify, like I dissect those scenes where I'm like, what are the senses? What is every emotion? What is my body feeling, during this time? Like, what is my breath like? What do my eyes feel like? Is any part of my skin like burning? Like, I really dissect those moments and pull out everything that's happening. And I really slow it down when I get to those places. And it kind of like a moment could take, not chapters, but pages and pages. So for the reader to really feel it.
Yeah, I think for me, which might come as a surprise, my favorite scenes to write are actually usually the dark moment, which is weird for me. I like writing heavy conversations. I don't like angst, but I like writing the like not the fight per se, but like letting all the feelings out. But that's because that's how I am in real life. My dad, when I was like 10, he was like, "You have no poker face whatsoever." Like, I wear all my emotions on my sleeve. You will always know how I feel. Some people don't believe it because they're like, "Wait, normal people don't always like tell you how they're feeling," and I'm like, "No, I do. I'll tell you every time." So for me, it's like fun to just be able to like let the characters like put it all out on the table. And like Kennedy said, I do try to think about like would this character be on the verge of a panic attack during this conversation, or is this a person who some of my characters are men who kind of like shut down before they do the outpour, so it's like, are they really stiff, do they not want to be touched, are they that kind of thing. So yeah, I try to think about like what that character is thinking about in that moment, what they're going through, and then I just write through it. That's usually the easiest part for me when I'm writing a book, though.
Yeah. Another Neon Gods question for you, Katee. I'm intrigued by Persephone's mother and why she does what she does. Will we get more insight into her in Psyche's book?
Yes. Psyche has a very different relationship with her mother than Persephone does. And I know everybody hates her in this book, but like I love Demeter. Like she's very Elena Tyrell of like from Game of Thrones. Like she's gonna do the bad thing, but it's for the greater, well, no, it's not the greater good. It's her family's greater power good. So Psyche is much more her mother's daughter than Persephone is. And so there's a little bit more acknowledgement of that, for better or worse, in the second book. So yes, there will be more Demeter and more revealed on that level, I guess.
Well, Kennedy, you can answer this too if you've thought about it, but I think this is a Rebekah Katee question, which is, have you ever considered doing a retelling which does mashups of myth or fairy tale main characters, so rematching pairs as opposed to how they are in their stories?
Oh
Now I am thinking about it.
Well, now she is.
I think Katee, you're like kind of close to already doing that. You're like there, kind of. You're there. You're like right on the edge. Like you're really close.
Yeah, they definitely mash up a little bit physically.
They smash us.
It's like a leap for you to do that. I think that's like your next step, really, to just. I thought about doing like, again, paranormal creatures that you don't usually see together getting together. That seemed like it would be fun, like a werewolf mermaid situation, like that would be fun. But I haven't like this is my first like full retelling series. It's kind of hard. I don't know if I'm gonna do it.
I would like an Into the Woods situation where it's like sort of it's all mashed into the same setting and it's like some overlap, but I would probably do that I don't know if I do that romance. Like I do want to do retelling, like I said, horror. I do want to do retellings horror wise. So that would be an interesting way to go about it. But yes, I have thought about it, I guess, but we'll see.
For everyone, what characters from either your own books or the other panelists' books would you want to hang out with in real life?
I want to hang out with Zenny. Like,
I think everyone wants to hang out with Zenny. I want to hang out with. I have a problem. I want to hang out with Zeus. I just want to see. Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested in being a fly. I'm more of a fly on the wall kind of person. I'm actually pretty introverted, and I feel like, again, Kennedy's heroes are like they're the kind of guys in real life where I'd be like flustered and like run away.
Like I would love to meet Jared, but I'd also be just sweating the entire time. Like
right. For sure.
Like he'd probably make me cry. Like
that's just me. I'd be like, oh hi, and like run the other way. That's
yeah.
Actually, I mean, since I'm reading Neon Gods right now, I'm falling for Hades. I'm loving him. So I would say Hades right now, Katee.
Mm.
And all your Black cowboys, Rebekah. Every time I see, have you seen the Idris Elba Concrete Cowboys on Netflix? Every time I see that, I think about you. I mean, I'm sure everybody does, but
puts good juju out in the world, hopefully.
Yeah.
my lips.
Katee, is the Wicked Villain series complete, or do you plan to add more?
Oh yeah, it's done. I will not be. Just because like you can only. I redid Sleeping Beauty sorta, but like all the like Snow White and Cinderella, it's all variations of the same kind of relationship dynamics, and I feel happy with where it's at, and I never say never, but I don't have plans to return.
Got it. Okay, so last question of the night. Obviously you read your own work as you're revising and writing, but do you ever go back and read your own books after they've been out for a while? And if so, do you recognize it as a story that you wrote?
I do. I had gotten a like damaged copy of Zenny a couple weeks ago, and I sat down and read half of it, and I was like, oh, this was fun.
I don't usually, but I'm rereading, like I said, The Bastard's Bargain right now. So I am like kind of like I miss these characters, and it's weird because it's been a couple, like 5 years, I don't know, some math number of years since I like wrote it. So it's there's enough distance there that I can enjoy the story without being like, oh, why didn't I make this choice? And so I'll probably end up rereading that whole series, but normally I don't. But I might have to change that now that I'm actually enjoying it.
It's so funny because it feels like every time I finish a book, every time I have to start a book, I don't remember how I wrote a book. Like literally, I'm like, how did I write a book? And how is it 400 pages? Like, I don't understand. And I don't know what it is about me, but when I read my books, I'm like, did I write that? Because it doesn't, maybe it's like you kind of, like when you give birth and you forget the pain. I think it's like that. And I'll read the book and I will literally, sometimes my readers will quote things back to me and I'll be like, that's cool. And they're like, that's from Long Shot, or that's from, I'm like, oh, is it? So I literally forget, I guess I just kind of zone out, but yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, that is all the time we have for tonight. Once again, celebrating the release of Neon Gods. Thank you so much, Katee, Rebekah, and Kennedy for joining us tonight. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, and thank you, Marie.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, congratulations, Katee. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I am signing off from Auntie's Bookstore in Spokane. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.